Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, condolences. We're recording this on Wednesday morning. I hope you've got over it by now. I took no pleasure in that result on Sunday because even I couldn't enjoy Man United beating anyone, it turns out, even you. But I hope you had a lovely day, did you?
We did. And given the nature of football, we're recording this on Wednesday morning. We're playing Forest tonight, and when you've got two matches in a week, it's the best cure for what happened at the weekend.
Yeah, try not to muck it up against Forest, if you wouldn't mind. It's not been a brilliant week for our football teams, Kieran, but for us, we're winners at last.
Yes, I went with the Baroness to a place called Proud Embankment on Monday night, and I thought I was up for. I'm not very organised, you know. I thought somebody had nominated me for Accounting Personality of the Year, which is an oxymoron. I think we can both agree. But it turns out we were, in fact, So apologies that I didn't continue. Turns out that we were up for Podcast of the Year, and we've won. So we are the best finance podcast as voted by a panel, and it's one step closer to a BAFTA as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. What's the name of the? Was it an accountancy magazine? Was it PQ?
That's right, PQ. So thank you. I think it was Adam, my friend Adam, who nominated us, and Graham who organised. The one thing you don't expect in sort of an accounting awards evening is we had a fire eater and an Elvis impersonator, which was just a very surreal experience all round. And it was very burlesque as well. There was a couple of burlesque scenes, which was wonderful.
Oh, was this before or after you got back to the hotel?
Well,
I imagine the fire eater will go down as expenses. I imagine, wouldn't it, Kieran? I would guess. Where's Proud Embankment? It's
next to the river on the bridge at Embankment Bridge. It's sort of a nightclub. I think it specialises in drag acts and big on LGBT. It was fantastic.
Yeah, Kieran. We all know my geography is not of the best. But even I would have put an embankment next to the river. I would have made that to PQ magazine. The first I heard of it was I got a very exciting tweet from someone I won't name to say that we won Podcast of the Year from GQ magazine. So I thought, well, that's a big step forward, isn't it? Anyway, Kieran, we know you're very busy today. So we need to keep the pod tight. Unfortunately, there's a shed load of news going on. There's a real shed load of news. For a change, yeah. And the first one I know will be very good news to quite a lot of our listeners, particularly one Marcia, I believe, who was very agitated by this story. But the FA have backed down on one of their recent announcements.
Yes, I think this is excellent. The FA made a huge error, in my view, in proposals to change the contracts for players in the National League, to withdraw some of the benefits and the protection that those young men have as far as their contracts were concerned. The FA were proposing to change the rules such that if you were injured, you would only get full pay for 12 weeks, and then you'd be on sick pay of £99 a week. But even worse than that was that clubs would have been allowed to cancel contracts if a player was out for 3 months with an injury on the view of a club-instructed medic, i.e. not an independent doctor, but a friend of a friend of a friend of the chairman. And for me, that is really concerning. The nature of football, it's a contact sport. And therefore, if you want people to play the match at its fullest extent, then there are going to be contact-based injuries. There's going to be soft muscle injuries as well. And the FA's proposals, and the FA and the National League said at the time, well, these are the proposed contracts. The players don't have to sign them. But of course, what the clubs would say, well, if you don't sign it, we'll go and recruit somebody else. The PFA, now the PFA don't represent players in the National League, but of course there are many, many clubs who were formerly members of the EFL, so therefore those players will have some form of representation. They were advised about this by the Football Association. The PFA's immediate response was, "We think this is a terrible idea." The FA, not for the first time in its history, decided to put on its tin ear, completely ignore the concerns and the reservations and go ahead. And therefore it was left to the players. And I think there is a common misconception, in my view, that football players aren't organised. They are looked down upon by many people in society. But the captains of the teams in the National League, they got together in order to protect their teammates. And I think special mention has to go to John Staunton of Yeovil Town, which is a club which is itself going through some pretty unpleasant times at present.
Yeah.
And Josh Staunton, he went to meetings, and the Football Association has backed down with these proposals. So that's got to be welcome. It's a precarious career. We already know that the contracts in the National League, I think they only last for 10 months. So they're not, yes, you will have some players on long-term contracts, but in the EFL, contracts tend to expire at the 30th of June. In the National League, most contracts expire on the 30th of April if you're on a one-year deal, or it's actually a 10-month deal. So it's not a career with a lot of certainty. And the proposals were, in my view, an absolute disgrace. Yes, clubs are losing money in the National League, but you don't attack the reason why people are going to the matches in the first place, which is to watch young elite athletes in competition.
Yeah, several Yeovil fans, Kieran, have actually been in touch with us to ask us to discuss what's going on there. So we will be doing that next week. I was going to say, fear not, Yeovil fans, but I think that might be a platitude. Two stories about season tickets in the Premier League, Kieran, starting at Aston Villa.
Yes. First of all, Aston Villa are playing magnificent football. So,
indeed.
Yeah, a good day to drop bad news. The cynic in me thinks. Villa increased season ticket prices by around about 10% for this season. And also, they removed some of the categories. So I don't think you can get a student ticket anymore, for example. So they've increased it by 10% for 22-23. And now they're increasing prices by a further 15% for 23-24. At the same time, they're introducing some safe standing, 2,500 tickets in the Holt End, and they're introducing different categories of product, including, for some fans, better Wi-Fi. But this is a particular bugbear of mine.
Yeah.
We should all have. We all pay for Wi-Fi. We all pay for our internet connections. So why some clubs persist with thinking we're still in 1997 and dial-up is beyond me. I think on one of the offerings, you even get a club tie and padded seats. But again, these type of things should, padded seats should be a minimum, surely, especially when you reach our age. So it's not great for fans. But here we then enter things from the business point of view. Aston Villa have a waiting list of 33,000 fans.
Wow.
Now, they know that if some fans say either I can't afford it or I don't think this increase in prices is fair, they'll say, well, okay, thanks very much for your support to date. We've got 33,000 people, and some of them will quite happily pay the amount So it comes down to sort of economics 101 and supply and demand. The club will also point out that should it qualify for Europe, and I think it's more of a case of which European competition Villa are going to be in next season rather than whether they're going to be in it or not. They will come under the auspices of UEFA's new financial and sustainability rules, which links the amount of money you can spend on wages to the amount of money coming in. So Villa would say, we need to get more money coming into the club to allow us to pay the wages to continue with the progress. If you take a look at Villa, and I went into a bit of spreadsheet heaven because the new owners have put a huge amount of money. They put over £500 million into the club in 5 years, which is a huge commitment. And also they've done that in the form of shares rather than loans, so they can't get that money back unless they sell Villa. Aston Villa have the third highest losses in the history of the Premier League, and only Chelsea and Manchester City, who have been funded, as we know, by Abramovich and Sheikh Mansour, have had higher losses over the course of the Premier League since 1992. And fans, the fans of both Chelsea and Manchester City will be able to say, we've had a return on the pitch for our losses. Villa are a fantastic club in a fantastic city, but they've not been extending the trophy cabinet for that £500 million. So the club is trying to generate more money from fans. Some of the fans will say, well, hold on, the owners are billionaires. They are immune from the cost of living increases that we are having to deal with at present. So that seems harsh. But that's where we are. And Villa say, well, we're not the most expensive club in the Premier League, unlike the one I think we're about to discuss in a minute.
Well, indeed, less than a minute, Kieran, because we know you've got to be somewhere else. Villa fans can at least console themselves that none of their season tickets are costing £3,000. And Shahid Khan, owner of Fulham, is getting slightly touchy about it, Kieran. Touchy.
Yes, yeah. I mean, £3,000 for non-hospitality tickets.
Yeah.
So that works out as £157 a match to watch Fulham.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, these are nice seats. They're about in line with the penalty box, but my seat's in line with the penalty box, sort of on the side, and I'm paying £28 a match. So it does seem very high. Again, from the perspective of the club, it will say there's been a huge investment in the new stand. We're trying to find alternative ways of generating money. So I think they've got this swimming pool on the top of the stand or something bizarre, and a hotel. So there has been a lot of money spent on infrastructure. But again, it's not just these tickets which have gone up in price. I think overall there's been an 18% price rise as far as Fulham is concerned. The Supporters Trust, and we know some people who are Fulham fans and on the Supporters Trust, they have expressed their reservations, but you get if we want to invest in the playing staff and if we want to comply with financial fair play, well, we're going to do that. And my concern is, and I'm not trying to go the full Wolfie Smith with regards to this, is that it's a further indication of the gentrification of the game. And my view is and you've always said to me this about Parsons Arms, and it's the same with the lads that I go to matches with. We come from all backgrounds, so we know postmen and barristers and doctors and road sweepers and everybody. But there's a danger that because of the popularity of the Premier League, that we are seeing more and more people being priced out of football.
Wolfie Smith was a great character, wasn't he? Was it Tooting Popular Front?
That's right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That was a great sitcom. Sadly underrated. £157 a game, Kieran. I'd want more than a view of the penalty area. I'd want at least dinner with Jordan Ayew after every game and possibly a happy ending. That's ludicrous amount of money. Preston, Kieran, are a club that we find ourselves talking about more and more often, but not in a negative way, but it's just quite a few little stories just seem to come out of Preston that look like they're good stories, but I'm never entirely sure that they are. And there's another one this week.
Yes, I mean it's yet another share issue in respect of Preston. Now, again, I've always said that share issues are, in my opinion, good news, because the nature of a share is it's money which is going into the club, which never has to be repaid. So this is a further almost £500,000. We know that the original owner, sadly passed away, but his family are showing continued commitment. £10 million have been put in this year. Preston are, I think, just a couple of points off the playoff. So the championship is very, very congested in terms of a couple of those remaining places. So you can see the reason why the money's going in. And I've said that, in my view, the likes of Preston, Millwall, and Luton, all of whom are having really good seasons, are some of the best run clubs financially in the championship. But then I went and checked my numbers. Preston are losing $400,000 a week.
A week.
And I'm saying, that's actually not too bad by championship standards. And I'm just concerned that I'm becoming inoculated to the huge sums which it costs. And I think we all are. We just accept it as de facto that getting out of the championship's an expensive business, and therefore somebody somewhere is going to be in a position to write out those checks. But that's not always the case. And certainly I got a phone call from quite a senior person in football journalism advising me about another club, which we won't mention, where the owner's business is in dire straits, and the owner's business was effectively funding the club. That's always a cause for concern, that if you become reliant on one person, what happens if that one person's circumstances change, as we saw at Bury, or they lose interest, as we saw at Derby? Things can turn very nasty very quickly.
Yeah, I watched the Luton-Middlesbrough game the other night, which was quite tricky because the camera spent more time looking at Bob Mortimer in the away end than the actual game, bless him. And I actually got worried at one stage because he got swamped when Borough scored. But they kept reminding us, as Sky are wont to do, because it counters the narrative that they've helped ruin football, that Luton, I think they're in the bottom 4 of money spent in the Championship, and yet they're doing so well. So it can be done, can't it?
Yes, and we've had Gary Sweet, who's one of the owners of Luton Town, on the show. And I think when you've got a strategy and you don't knee-jerk react to events, you can build a club over a period of time. And I think it's good to see that does work. That they lost Nathan Jones to Southampton just before Christmas, and I believe that they're estimated to get somewhere in the region of £3 million compensation in respect of that, which will help the club regardless of whether they go up or not. But they're doing spectacularly well, and good luck to them for the rest of the season.
It strikes me, Kieran, that it takes quite a lot to be banned by the FA, but someone has been this week.
Yes, this is A.D. Ward, who is a football agent, and he runs a company called Colossal Sports Management, and both of them have been given a 20-month ban in terms of work within football. Colossal Sports Management is a successful club. I went on to Company's House, as is my wont, and had a look at their accounts. They've got £8 million in the bank. They just lent one of the directors a further £7 million on top of that £8 million. So they're clearly doing very well. And for the sake of transparency, about 18 months ago, I was interviewed as part of a panorama. Panorama is something completely different.
I'd watch Panorama.
Yes.
That'd be an interesting topical look at this week's perfumes. Would be great.
I think it's up there with monkey tennis, isn't it? We'll have to pitch it to a producer. And this was a Panorama documentary, and it was called Football's Broken Dreams. And it's about academy players, and it's about young people in football. The accusation and the charges which have been upheld against AD Ward and Colossal Sports Management is that they've been approaching under 16s.
Right.
Now, that's the FA's position. It's you're not allowed to do it until the 1st of January, in which the young person turns 16. And I don't know the exact circumstances, but we do know some other agents, and we do hear the horror story. I think they're horror stories because you're dealing with young people who are still in education.
Children, yeah. Kieran. Let's call them what they are. They're children.
Call them children. And all of a sudden, on their 13th birthday, they get a pair of boots or they get a PlayStation, and mum and dad get taken out for dinner and on holiday, and with the aim of trying to entice them into a relationship, because some agents, and I'm not making any accusations with regards to AD Ward here, but some agents just see these children as potential future meal tickets. And it is a cause for concern. And I don't know many other industries in which there's a 99% failure rate as exists in football. In fact, it's more than 99%.
More than that, yeah.
So there has to be protection. It's very difficult to enforce from the perspective of the FA. And whilst I was critical of them earlier with regards to the contracts in the National League, this is more nuanced in the sense that who's going to dib them in? Who's going to dib in the rogue agents? Because if the players, if the child's parents get some form of benefit, they're not going to turn off the taps. The child doesn't want to, because he knows that the parents might lose out. Actually quite likes getting a new pair of boots at Christmas and on birthdays and so on, and the benefits that brings. And the agents aren't going to report themselves. So I think it's only when things start to go wrong. But it is far too common as far as this industry is concerned. And I know that there are, we've had the introduction of FIFA with agents' exams, and people have known these exams are tough. That won't necessarily stop this behaviour because you can pass the exam and be a wrong one, as well as not pass the exam and be a wrong, in my view.
It seems like, Kieran, we may be in a position soon to give Birmingham City fans, for the first time in a long time, some positive news.
Yes, we've been talking too often about Birmingham with regards to the ownership that they presently have, which is, we think is based in Hong Kong, but it might not be, because it appears to be further offshore. And again, fair play to the EFL. They are trying to get through the fog, which often exists with offshore ownership. We've got an American hedge fund manager, Tom Wagner. He's buying a stake. Now, is that going to be a controlling stake? We know that 46% of the shares are up for offer. Could he therefore acquire some other shares from other people? What Birmingham City need is A, transparency, and B, being boring. In terms of being boring is good. Think of all the clubs that we never talk about. They just get on with their existence, and the fans don't have to deal with some of the crises. There's been too many problems in respect of Birmingham, involving points deductions, part of the grounds being closed down, and so on. And somebody who comes in, and remember, a new owner is a new owner. He's not necessarily a better owner, as Bury found out when they moved from Stuart Day to Steve Dale, and when we've seen with some other clubs. I think if you talk to Charlton fans, they've had a series of owners with whom it's fair to say there has been more than a smattering of dissatisfaction. So fingers crossed for Birmingham, because I like Birmingham as a city, and I like Birmingham as an away trip, and nobody deserves to have gone through what they've gone through in the past few years.
Yeah, to be fair to the potential new owners of Birmingham, they may not be better, Kieran, but it's hard to see how they could be worse.
Yes,
Really.
yeah, it's a low bar.
Yeah. There's been a lot of speculation recently, Kieran, about which superstars of football Newcastle United might be buying in the summer, but it turns out they might be buying something slightly different first.
You're absolutely right, and I'm not going to go the full Steve McLaren here. They're planning to buy. Well, no, they are in talks to buy a controlling interest in a Belgian club from Ostend for around about £10 million. The club currently has US owners who have other clubs as part of their portfolio, and I think this is a recurring theme of multi-club ownership. And as you know, I'm pretty agnostic in terms of MCOs, provided the integrity of the game is preserved. And I don't have a huge issue. My big concern is if we're still doing this show in 10 years' time, and there's only 4 people in the world that own football clubs, then it's gone too far. So Newcastle are looking to do this. They've seen the benefits of other clubs. I think they do appear to have a strategy as well as short-term money, Newcastle, and that's why they've progressed so well since the new owners have come into St James's Park. The benefits, as we've said before, you get consistency in terms of training, diet, culture between the two clubs. You can put young players out on loan. If you see other good players in Europe and you can't bring them to Newcastle because of the post-Brexit adjustments with regards to recruiting 16 and 17-year-olds and governing body endorsements and so on, you can effectively park them at another club with a view to building up their portfolio of points and so on. So I think this is the first step. I can certainly see the benefits from the Newcastle owners and PIF's perspective of building up a broader base, because everybody looks at Manchester City and sees the success that club is having, of which part of the benefit is having this set of tentacles around the world developing talent.
Yeah, you probably didn't see it, Kieran. You were probably enjoying your first soya latte at Wembley, but the first 25 minutes of the Newcastle Spurs game, Newcastle were incredible. And I suspect, Kieran, we will still be doing this pod in 10 years' time, only Matron will be asking us to keep the noise down a little bit and remind us that we're supposed to be in bed by 10 o'clock. And if we could stop playing Sex Pistols songs on the piano, that'd be great as well. Rangers have got a battle off the pitch coming up, Kieran.
Yes, or rather, Rangers have got another battle off the pitch. Right. Rangers in a dispute with Mike Ashley. There's effectively an ongoing boardroom squabble because the former chairman Dave King is constantly throwing darts at the current board, and Elite Sportswear, who were effectively the Hummel's distribution people, who went into administration a few months ago. Remember, there was all this kerfuffle because there were clubs like Millwall and Coventry and others who weren't able to sell kit because they didn't have the legal ownership at the time. Well, one of the things that Elite Sports weren't very happy about was that Rangers had switched their kit manufacturing deal to the new kids on the block in the form of Castore. And they felt that Rangers hadn't necessarily given them due process. I think Hummel were entitled to match what was offered, and they claimed that it wasn't. So the administrators are now saying, well, we've spoken to our legal advisors, and we think there is a case for going forwards. So, as somebody that has worked in insolvency, you tend to be quite cautious because you don't want to spend money on legal claims that are spurious, because you are there to protect the interests of creditors. And this is a £9.5 million case. So, Rangers, I think you've got to be honest, that they're behind Celtic on the pitch, and they've still got a fair amount of catching up to do on the pitch off the pitch in terms of sort of the legacy issues and the boardroom issues, and there are too many disputes, and Celtic are able to sort of serenely just go on and focus on football. And if you've got all of these distractions, it's never good. Now, the chances are this will be settled out of court. Either an amount will be agreed, or some form of joint pronouncement will be made. But unless Rangers have got a watertight case, this could mean more money being paid out for non-footballing issues at a time when the club is playing catch-up still with Celtic. And as we know, Scotland is a country where being second is being nowhere. As far as those two clubs are concerned.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of Scotland, we've got Neil Doncaster coming on again soon. So if you have any questions for him about Scottish football, send them to the usual address, which we'll give at the end.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Just to elaborate on a point you made there, Kieran, it seems to me that it is slightly tricky or unusual for an administrator to proceed with legal action because, they're meant to be sensible, and you run the risk, surely, of running up, as you say, huge legal bills in a case that they may lose, which sort of goes against what they should be doing as administrators, doesn't it?
It does, but also as administrators, you have an obligation to try to get as much money as possible on behalf of all of the creditors. Now, if you go to a lawyer, and not all lawyers are going to give you the Saul Goodman approach of every case is a guaranteed win with me, buddy. The lawyers will assess the situation and they will say, well, in our professional opinion, you've got an X% chance, or these are the key elements which we think is going to help you to be successful with regards to a prosecution, and therefore we would and what you're doing, you're asking for effectively for some sort of legal counsel. We would strongly recommend, think on the balance of probabilities, you've probably got a chance, or it's a punt. Now, if they say it's a punt, the chances are, if I was the administrators, I would say, okay, thanks for the advice. Let's move on, and we're going to do something else. So they must feel that they've got a fairly strong case, or they feel that they might be able to come to a settlement with Rangers that will be less than 9.5 million, but both parties would be able to walk away with some money.
Two stories, Kieran, about two of the biggest clubs in world football. The first one, it seems almost counterintuitive to say this, but PSG have posted record losses for last season. PSG posting record losses, Kieran.
Yeah, if you've got two of the most saleable football assets in the world, you've got Mbappe and you've got three. You've got Neymar and you've got Messi. So, from a commercial perspective, it must be utmost heaven. And I've noted the number of PSG shirts that I've seen when I've been in Europe and even in the UK as well, because people want to be associated with success. They win Ligue 1 every year. That's Mr. Andrew, my French teacher. He'll be impressed by that. And they qualified for the Champions League, although they never seem to win it, but they lost €375 million, which is a staggering amount of money. And I think it shows you can have all of the talent there, but that talent is costing you a fortune. I think people are aware that Kylian Mbappe had the opportunity to go to Real Madrid. He negotiated, by all accounts, a pretty decent pay rise from PSG, it became very political as to where his future was going to lie, and loyalty bonuses and all these types of things. And the club is, yes, it's selling out, but French TV rights are not high. And part of the reason why the value of French TV rights are not very high is that French football is not competitive. You know who's going to win it each season. And, for all of the faults about distribution of money in this country, nobody would have had Arsenal down to win the Premier League at the start of the season. Of course, they still might fail to do so, but certainly nobody would have had them to be leading the Premier League all the way through to the start of May.
I'm sure Mr. Andrews, your French teacher, a man who probably devoted his entire life to education, will be delighted to learn that one of the outcomes is that you make a passable attempt at pronouncing Ligue 1 correctly on an award-winning podcast. He'll be very pleased. We had a question, Kieran, on last week's questions pod, which basically said, how much more bonkers can it get at Barcelona financially? And you said you didn't know, but nothing would surprise you. And it's taken only 3 days for it to get even more. But I mean, this story, Kieran, involves the word Barcelona and 1.5 billion euros. And you just go, why? Well, how? What? So please explain what's going on and how they're managing to do it.
Barcelona is the most hold my beer football club on the planet at present in terms of what it gets up to. So what they've done is they've said, we've been spending money like it's going out of fashion. We've been having all of these economic levers, which glorify payday loans, as we've said. And now they've said, we're going to have less money coming in future years because we've effectively we've committed to it. So now they're going to increase the capacity of Camp Nou from 99 to 105,000 fans. And they're taking out a 1.5 billion euro loan. And then it starts to get a little bit sort of bizarre because it says, we've got 20 banks. And this is quite common, that you will get a consortium of lenders. So we've got 20 blue chip banks who and other funders who are going to give us the money. And that makes sense from the bank's point of view because it means that you're not overexposed to Barcelona or PSG or the individual borrower. So this always makes a lot of sense. And then Barcelona says, but we're not going to tell you who they are. I'm going, this is more mysterious than Mysterious Girl from Peter Andre, surely, because it just makes no sense whatsoever. And say, we're going to repay it somewhere between 5 and 24 years.
Wow.
That's quite a broad brush in terms of, in 24 years' time, that's 2047. That's a long way away. 5 years for £1.5 billion, you're going to find yourself 300 million euros a year. So it all does seem part of the soap opera which Barcelona have become. And I think that's sad in many ways, because when Barcelona started to be successful and all of the connection at the time with what was happening in respect of Catalonia and sort of the identity of the area that the club championed. And we remember when Barcelona was the only club that was refusing to take front of shirt advertising, and then it said, right, we'll do it for UNICEF. Everybody, because you got to like Barcelona, haven't you? You can't not like them, as well as some of the players they've had there have been absolutely magnificent as well. And now they've just become a bit of a clown show, which is sad as much as anything else.
Yeah, maybe it's not that they're refusing to name these banks. Maybe it's the banks are saying, look, we'll give you the money, but don't tell anybody our name, in case the directors turn up and go, you've done what? You've what? It's because it's just... I actually laughed out loud when I saw this story, Kieran, as it's coming so soon as it did, off the back of that question, which literally said, how much more can they get away with? Milan, Kieran, AC Milan, are not quite up there with Barcelona and PSG in terms of profile, but again, they are one of the biggest clubs in Europe, in European history, without any doubt at all. But there's something not quite right there either.
Yes. Italian prosecutors, and we've said, I had family that used to run a financial institution in Italy, and they said, I think it's fair to say, business practices there were unusual, and it's very much a grace and favour country when it comes to getting deals done. But the Italian prosecutors have certainly got cojones of steel. What they've done is that this is all to do with Elliott Management's sale of AC Milan to Redbird Capital. This is for just over €1 billion. So yes, it's a significant amount of money. And there's been sort of rumblings and grumblings for the past few months, but now the prosecutors have been in touch with the Luxembourg authorities, and I'll say no more that the Luxembourg authorities, and Luxembourg, not a country noted for being particularly keen on peeping behind the curtain. There's been seizures and searches of documents as to exactly what's going on with regards to this deal. It has gone through. There's no evidence that Redbird shouldn't be the owners, and Redbird themselves are sort of indirectly connected with FSG and Liverpool. So there are potential Premier League sort of arm's length concerns here, but you would think that Elliott Management and Redbird are both organisations which like to project themselves as being sort of fairly blue chip, and the last thing you want is this type of activity taking place in the background. So it's one which goes into my pending tray of watch and wait, and unfortunately there's far too many issues in my pending tray for comfort these days.
Have you actually got an in-out pending tray like a 70s sitcom?
Well, I have on my iPad, yes.
Of course you have. While we're in Italy, Kieran, I'd like to thank the many, many listeners who got in touch to tell me when I asked what the Italian for shenanigans was.
Yes.
Turns out there is an Italian word for shenanigans, or two words, atavista disonesta. Apologies for the pronunciation. I didn't have a Mr. Andrews in my life teaching me Italian, but again, it just made me laugh so much that within minutes of that pod being broadcast, hundreds of people had told me what the Italian for shenanigans was, which is one of the many reasons I love doing this show. While we're talking European football, Kieran, our penultimate story is UEFA, essentially, and non-big-time European clubs.
Yes, a new body has been created to represent those football clubs who are not part of the ECA, the European Club Association. Now, presently, 5% of UEFA's annual revenues go to 650 clubs who are in the top divisions of UEFA's membership, so yes, 55 countries, who do not qualify for Champions League, Europa League, Conference. And they currently get what is referred to as solidarity payments in exactly the same way that the Premier League gives solidarity payments to club in the EFL. And Steve Parish of Crystal Palace, he's been quite high profile in this new organisation. And he's saying, with the expansion of the Champions League, the gap between what he says, the elite clubs and the aspirational clubs, the clubs that want to compete for those European places, which have become effectively pretty sealed. When was the last time, with the exception of Leicester, when was the last time, apart from the usual suspects, getting into those places, although Newcastle are clearly a disruptor with the wealth that they're owning. So the suggestion is that 5% of money should be increased to 10%, which would allow a greater chance of competition, because we mentioned the issue as far as French football is concerned. It's not a competitive league in terms of that PSG are going to win the league competition, and that does sort of dilute the excitement to a certain extent. There are other countries in Europe that, if you qualified, especially if you get into the Champions League group stages on two or three occasions, the financial benefit that gives you is so significant that it puts you light years ahead of the rest of the league. And then it becomes a procession, and then it's a case of you're fighting for second or third place each season because you know who the winners are going to be. That has a knock-on impact upon domestic TV rights, whereas all at the same time, UEFA's rights are increasing in value, and there becomes a complete disconnect. So we await with interest. I think there was an element of irony in that, and I'm not having a go at Steve Parish here, but he was saying, we shouldn't be giving too much more money to the EFL clubs in the form of solidarity payments, but we should be getting more solidarity payments ourselves from UEFA. So I think I've always said that as far as the distribution of money is concerned, we need a 92 club solution, and just improving things in the Championship and reducing competition in League One and League Two, and also potentially the Premier League with some of the proposals seems to be a bit skew-whiff to me. But of course, you're never going to get 92 people to agree on any form of distribution.
Yeah, Steve Parish spoke at the inaugural meeting, didn't he, of this group, I think, earlier this week. So I texted him to ask him for a quote for the pod, and he texted back to say, "Nice try," because he obviously knew that I was hoping he'd accidentally say, "Well, it doesn't really matter because we're getting Jose Mourinho as manager, and we'll be in the Champions League season after next." But he did say, I think there are 40 clubs represented at the inaugural meeting, with many more interested. I think Steve, in the same way that he has become the sort of unofficial spokesman for the other 14 clubs in the Premier League, I think is positioning himself very carefully here as somebody who's on the side of the underdog, if you like. Although, as you say, that doesn't include the EFL. But also, I think it's actually a rather a canny move, because when we are trying to attract talent from other European clubs, they will at least have heard of Steve Parish and Crystal Palace because of his profile in this new group, basically. Our final story, Kieran, takes us back to England and takes us back in a funny sort of way to our very first story. And also, I don't know if you've got a tray, along with your in, out and pending tray. I don't know if you've got one that says About Time Too, because I think that this story would fit quite nicely in that tray.
Yes. This is all in respect of dementia and footballers. There has been research in academia. So there's a guy up in Scotland called Dr. Willie Stewart. There's also been a Swedish investigation, which indicates the results of that came that if you are a former football player, you are 50% more likely to suffer from dementia than somebody who has not been in the sport. And the reason for this, it's all linked to the heading of balls. Yeah. Footballs. The PFA, the Players Foundation, the Players Foundation, which is the sort of the charity arm of the PFA, it does provide some support for former members, but most importantly, it does not provide nursing care. Now, nursing care costs somewhere between 60 to 80 grand per person per year. And I think there's 200 former players who are currently suffering from dementia. But this looks as if the governing bodies, along with the PFA and the Players Foundation, are going to commit themselves via a dementia care fund. And as you rightly said, it's not a case of, it's happening. We're in 2023. There are too many horror stories, and you hear, I've heard the likes of Hayley McQueen spoke about her father, and Jeff Astor's wife, and so on.
And Chris Sutton talking about his dad as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And these are heartrending stories, and anybody that's had a relative who has had dementia knows the sadness and the turmoil that causes, not just the individual, but all of those families. Football is an industrial sport. This is an industrial injury. And the fact the authorities have been washing their hands of it for so long, I think, is a stain on the people in charge of the game. But again, we've said with regards to the Football Association, and again, the Football Association say we can't afford to do it ourselves. I think that we do need broad shoulders in terms of providing the funding here. So I'm hoping that all of the senior authorities in football will provide some support in respect of this.
It's still slightly dispiriting, though, Kieran, reading the comments on newspaper websites and listening to phone-ins, that in amongst I believe in the sensible majority, there is still a substantial number of people saying there are millions of people who have dementia, none of whom played football. And there are still people saying, well, these people knew what they were getting into when they took up football for a living. They did very well out of it. I don't quite understand that attitude, but it still prevailed amongst some people.
Unfortunately, the court of whataboutery is a very dispiriting one, and that's what we have in two aspects of life. Those people that have worked with asbestos, those people that have worked down mines, they started their careers often in terms of not necessarily ignorance, but certainly a lack of familiarity with the prospective challenges. And if I was 12 and was just starting playing football and I was good, I'm not going to worry about what's going to happen to me potentially when I'm 50 or 60.
Yeah.
So you understand, and football's also great.
Yeah, that's true. That'd be a good way to end the pod, Kieran. Football's also great, as luckily that is the end of the pod. Thanks to everyone who has donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that would be very kind of you. You can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And remember, we have our end of season quiz coming up. And if you do want to take part in that, I'm afraid you will have to go to patreon.com/priceoffootball, because we have to keep it private after previous disruptions. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, just a general question or one for Neil Doncaster about Scottish football, then email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for all the kind messages after we won the award as well. Some very touching things, and we do have a hoot recording 2 or 3 times a week, as it is now. When we go back to that first day when Kevin and I both looked at each other, and I could see Kevin going, "What on earth have I been? Why have I been lumbered with this? This is a dead donkey." But yeah, we're delighted. There's other ways that you can support the show, and one of those ways is to go on to your app and to give us a review. It helps us in the charts, helps us with algorithms and booking guests and so on. But by all accounts, it doesn't matter what you say as far as the reviews are concerned. So you could even say you would rather have it presented by celebrity Middlesbrough fan Bob Mortimer and mysterious girl singer Peter Andre. And I think that would be a very surreal show and wouldn't bother us in the bit.
I don't wish to sound unkind, Kieran, but that would be a battle of wits in which one of them is an unarmed man. I won't say which is which because that would be unfair, but I would listen to it. Yes. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.